So, what do you think of the title of this reflection? The word truth is there, so be honest. Are you getting tired of this? The gift of dot dot dot? Anyone? And is truth a gift? Is truth a gift you wish you could return? Is truth a gift or an irritant in our lives? Or is it both? So many questions, and in truth, I don't even know where to start this reflection. But I'm going to argue there are these two good reasons why truth is a gift. And I hope somebody disagrees with me on Wednesday night at the Lenten groups. So I have one short answer and one long answer. You'll at least like the short answer, I think. And who knows, perhaps the long answer will take longer than one reflection. In fact, I know it will. So first, the short answer. Question, what is this machine? Polygraph. Yes, better known as a lie detector. Anyone ever use one that would admit to it? No, okay. So there are different types of lie detectors, but they all work by measuring a person's physiological response to different stimuli. The machines measure changes in a person's heart rate, skin conductivity, skin capacitance, and other parameters. And lie detectors work when they do work because of the simple fact that for most people, lying causes us stress. And that stress leads to physiological changes that can be then measured on a machine like that. So even though they're called lie detectors, they don't measure lies, they measure stress. And I would say, based purely on that single fact, truth is a gift. I mean, think about it. If lying causes us stress, why do it? We should want to tell the truth for our own personal health and well being. And if we actually want to find deep peace in our life, as we discussed last week, if we actually want to live in peace, lying will only take us further away from that objective. That includes, of course, lying to ourselves. If you want to live peaceful lives, we should speak and live out our own truth. And that's not just about personal physiology, it's common sense. Because when we lie, we end up creating drama that we then have to deal with in our future. The way to move on peaceably in life is to tell the truth. As someone once said, if you tell the truth, it becomes part of your past. If you lie, it becomes part of your future. Now, I know sometimes truth can hurt, obviously, but because truth is a path to progress, that hurt will not last forever. Whereas when we lie, that can generate hurts that do last for a long time. So that's the short answer. Avoiding the truth leads to stress. Therefore, we should embrace truth. At least we should embrace truth if we actually want to live in peace. Anybody want the longer answer? Good. But before we get there, we need to at least consider what do we mean by the word truth anyway. And I thought about this, and I think there are three essential questions you have to consider. We have to consider. First, would we expect truth to be simple or complicated? Is truth relative or absolute? Or is that question even itself relative? And does truth change or is it static? Because I will argue many of us idly grew up thinking that truth was actually pretty simple. Our job was to listen to the church or perhaps some other authority. They'd tell us what to think, and there we go. But I don't think it's really that simple. For one thing, what we consider to be true changes over time. People used to take as true, for example, that women were inferior to men. If we went back 120 years, pretty much everyone thought that, including most women. Amy Pohl pointedly put this out, saying it takes years as a woman to unlearn what you have been taught to be sorry for, which I think encapsulates that very well. Our society used to be very sexist. Today we think differently. Today we believe all people have equal value. Well, we don't actually, but I like to think we're moving in that direction. People used to take as true, for example, that white people were superior to everyone else. Charles Darwin, who is credited with the theory of evolution, wrote in 1871. Actually, I'm not going to read the quote because it's truly disgusting. Let me just encapsulate by saying Darwin's original theory of evolution was racist. Well, 1871, are we surprised? Today, we believe all people have equal value. Well, again, we don't actually, but I like to think we're heading in that direction. It used to be true that the earth is flat. It used to be true that demons cause mental illness. It used to be true that Pluto was a planet. It used to be true that the sun revolved around the earth. None of these things are true anymore. Truth changes. Now, I know I argue with some people, and they say, no, 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 it's not the truth changes, but our sense of the truth changes. Okay, but usually when you talk to people, what we believe to be true today, we actually think is true. So I don't find that a very meaningful distinction myself. And there's no doubt that when the truth changes, people often react negatively and often with a lot of fear. I love the story from 1829 about a group of very educated people, including medical doctors, who gathered to warn society about an upcoming evil, a terrifying new invention called a steam locomotive. One expert declared if a train ever went more than 20 miles an hour, the human lungs could not function properly. Passengers will suffocate. Another expert argued that if the train goes too fast, the air won't be able to keep up with the train. These are true stories. Fear is a common response to change. Today, people speak about how social media is destroying our ability to form meaningful relationships. There's some justification to that, of course, but I think the very first time I'm aware that same claim was made was with the invention of the telephone. The idea you could pick up talk to a box on the wall instead of going to visit your neighbor, this was going to destroy society completely. Fortunately, we do usually move beyond our fears. And according to one source, it took one generation from moving from complaining that trains are too fast to complaining that trains are too slow. Personally, of course, I have no problem with the idea that truth changes over time. I am a scientist as well as a theologian and a minister, because science has long held the view that, of course, knowledge changes over time as we learn things. And as knowledge changes, our understanding of truth naturally changes with it. Science, does not even attempt to find truth in an absolute sense. The job of science is to take today's truth as a starting point for how reality works and then keep poking it to try to find even better answers. And you may have noticed that's more or less the approach I take to the Christian faith. Incidentally, if you're curious, when truth changes in science, actual scientists, who are human beings after all, react strongly against change. I myself have witnessed a number of religious wars at scientific conferences, and they even call them religious wars. But usually the period of denial is very short-lived in science, because scientific assertions can usually be tested. And when new truths are proven, scientists roll with it relatively quickly. I find in religious circles that doesn't always happen. I've observed that the period of denial when truth changes can last a very long time. Which is odd, because I believe religious principles can also be tested. In very short summary, Jesus preached love. And we can ask ourselves how well we are manifesting love in our own lives, in our own faith. And it's okay if our sense of truth changes as we strive to become more loving. U.S. legislator and Christian minister James Tallarico has famously said of other Christians, "Don't tell me what you believe. Show me how you treat other people. I'll tell you what you believe." Tallarico and I agree that Christian principles can actually be tested by observations, which means Christianity can be made better. Truth changes. And when truth changes, we can fight to defend the past, or we can move into a better future, hopefully a more loving future. So one issue with truth that I'm arguing is it changes over time. But of course, even at a particular point in time, like, say, today, we do not all necessarily agree on what is true. And again, come on Wednesday to the Lenten discussion groups, because we do not agree on everything, and that's great. Often people disagree because we come with different assumptions and perspectives. So here is the cheesiest example I could find, that you've probably seen before, where two people are looking at a figure on the floor, and from one side the figure looks like a 6, and from the other side it looks like a 9. And both people are completely convinced that they and only they are right. Of course, the people are just looking from a different perspective. Now, that's a very silly cartoon. But I have to tell you, I see this cartoon played out all the time in our society, in our media. We often have a very strong attachment to our particular perspective on truth, and we sometimes fail to realize there even are other perspectives. Sometimes we mistake our perspective on truth with truth itself. And usually other perspectives exist. And maybe we can do our best when we try to understand these different perspectives instead of just doubling down on our own truth, our own perceived truth. Our perspectives impact us every day, and often we take our own perspective as normal, proper, and we fail to see alternative perspectives. Sometimes we fail to even admit there might be other perspectives. So, if that seemed a bit abstract, let me share a true story. It's nobody you know and not me, but the hero of our story went to a car rental agency at an airport to pick up the car that they had arranged to pick up, which they had booked like months earlier. When they got to the counter, there was a single person in front of them at the counter, so they were like listening into the conversation between the other customer and the agent. And the customer said to the agent, "I don't have a reservation, but do you have any cars available?" And our hero in the story immediately thought, "What an idiot. What a moron. You should know you have to book a rental car, right?" And I'm sure that some of us are thinking the same thing. But the customer then said to the agent, "I'm really sorry about this. I did book with another company, but they said they have nothing in at the moment." So the person was not actually a moron. They were just unlucky. And in fact, they found themselves in a situation any of us could easily find ourselves in that situation too. And so if we wanted to direct any emotional energy at that customer, it should be sympathy, not hostility. Our perspectives impact us every day. I invite us to take a brief moment to consider this cartoon and consider what conflicts we are having with other people that are perhaps a matter of perspective. Imagine how we might open our minds to the possibilities of other perspectives. Imagine how to move your conflict in a more open, honest conversation. Imagine healing, and maybe go do it this week. Just take a brief moment to reflect on that cartoon and your life. Now, I like talking about perspectives because they can be graphically illustrated in lots and lots of fun ways. And it's fun to create silly images like this one. But often we disagree about truth not because of perspective, but because of underlying assumptions that are harder to show visually and usually not very much fun to show. So I want to share something with you, and I'm sorry, it's math. Just I have a couple of equations to share. All good? All good? All good? No. All good? Oh. Those equations are all perfectly true. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking when they gave me a clerical color, I threw away my calculator. Maybe you're thinking the real reason I left science, which I never told you before, is because I'm atrocious at math. You probably think those equations are wrong, but you only think that because I'm making an assumption that you're not, or you're making an assumption I'm not. You're assuming I'm using a base 10 number system, aren't you? But I'm actually using a base 2 number system, also called binary. And yes, those equations are all true. Just give me a minute. Shane, you want to zoom in a bit? This won't take long, and if this is too boring, I'll do it longer over coffee. But how were we taught to count in kindergarten? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Anyone else? So just make two little changes. One is count this way. 1, 2, I pulled the 1 down. 3, 4, 5. Now one more change. Realize I go 1, 2. Well, if I want 3, 3 is just 2 plus 1. So this becomes 3, which is what it says on the screen. And this becomes 4. See, these things are right. Yeah, whatever. Our failure to understand other people's assumptions sometimes create conflict in the church. Our failure to understand other people's assumptions is one driving force in our war against Iran. Western nations spew ridiculous assumptions about Muslims that are wildly inaccurate. Western nations have to realize the path to peace will involve accepting that Islam is a legitimate religion, and we have to find ways to partner with them, to partner with Muslims for peace, and not simply demonize Muslims to justify our own violations of international law. Let me share another true story. Two professors were at an evening meeting at the University of Saskatchewan. They were friends. They both normally took the bus to work, but on occasion they each drove, and if they had their car, they would offer the other one a ride. Now, this meeting was held at night in the winter, so it was reasonable to expect at least one of them drove that day. At the end of the meeting, one professor asked the other, "Ride home?" The second professor answered, "Sure." Both professors walked out to the totally empty parking lot, expecting that the other one had brought a car. The second professor assumed they were being asked if they wanted a ride home, but in fact, they were being asked if they would provide a ride home. And they both had a good laugh while they waited for the bus. Assumptions matter. Let's just take a brief moment to reflect on these equations and consider what conflicts you're having with other people in your life that might perhaps be a matter of assumptions. Imagine how you might open your mind to the possibility of other valid assumptions. Imagine how to move your conflict in a more open, honest conversation. Imagine healing, and maybe go do it this week. Take a moment to reflect on this image and conflict in your life. And I want to close by digging into the biblical reading today. And thank you for reading that, chat. And you read that very long story, but all I actually want to lift up is kind of the punchline. Because in the Gospel of John, Jesus talks to a Samaritan woman. And there are many, many things to lift up in that story. But today I just want to discuss the woman's response to Jesus. Because the woman ran into town and told everyone to come out and meet Jesus. And people responded and came out. But what was the sales pitch that the woman used to get the villagers excited? It was the woman's testimony. But that testimony was, Jesus told me everything I had ever done. The woman was not impressed by Jesus because of clever arguments. She was impressed because he told the truth. And strangely enough, she did not run away from that truth. She ran towards it, in fact, and ran to announce it. She ran back into town and said, "Come and see." This is the strange gift of truth. Truth can sting, truth can embarrass us, truth can expose us, but truth can also set us free. The beginning of this reflection, I showed a picture of a lie detector, a machine that measures stress that our bodies feel when we lie. But I think our bodies are smarter than our brains sometimes, because our bodies know something that our minds sometimes forget, which is that peace comes from truth. Lies create stress. Truth leads to freedom. So perhaps the real question today is very simple. Where in your life are you avoiding the truth? Where in your life might truth actually bring you peace? Because if Jesus teaches us anything in this story, it is this. Truth is not given to shame us. Truth is given to heal us. And that is why truth, even uncomfortable truth, is one of God's gifts. Embrace the gift of truth. Amen.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.